we are currently on Caleb Downs' watch. Top player in the transfer portal. It sounds like to me at this point in time is in a decision mode rather between two teams. Now, I don't know this to be 100% factual, but from everything that we're hearing, all the reports per Pete Nakos, who does tremendous work for us here at On3 covering the portal and NIL and things alike, Ohio State and Georgia are the two that are pretty much most firmly in it for Caleb Downs. I personally would be wildly surprised if it's not one of those two teams. So for Caleb Downs, like I said just a moment ago, the top player in the transfer portal. It's funny to talk about fit with a guy like Caleb Downs because I'm sure there's different schemes where he fits in better and that accentuates his skill set a little bit more. But like Caleb Downs, man, like he goes well with anything. Like you never say no to adding Caleb Downs to your roster, obviously. And whether you put him in as a rolled down safety playing the star position, whether you put him, in deep center field to just kind of be a ball hawk back there, like he has the skill set to contribute in any capacity, in any defense, in any way, shape, or form. The bottom line here is like just give him some cleats, put him on the field. Put him on the field, whatever it is, and he will contribute for you in a massive way. Jesse Simonton, who's a national columnist for us here at On3, has a great article on on3.com talking about how Caleb Downs impacts the playoff picture for teams like Georgia and Ohio State. What I want to do right now is kind of just unpack these two options more or less for Ohio State and Georgia. As we're on the air right now live, I believe Ohio State may, in fact, be having a meeting with Caleb Downs. So we'll keep an eye on this and have a reaction for you as soon as he does make a decision. But when you talk about Georgia, to me, that would be the school that I would have to place money on if I were to bet on where he were to go next. And the reason why, Georgia just seems to check all the boxes for me. Like I said this yesterday, and I'll say it again, the ESPN report citing why Caleb Downs was undecided on if he'll stay at Alabama or go into the portal mentioned Travaris Robinson and his relationship with Caleb Downs being a reason why, hey, he's not at Bama anymore, therefore I don't know if I'm going to stay at Bama. So if he's a reason why you're considering going into the portal, and ultimately it sounds like going into the portal, is he not a reason why you would commit? So for Georgia, like that would be the way that I would lean most heavily, the relational side of things, the way that they have consistently been in the Caleb Downs sweepstakes, even since the high school ranks. He's from the state of Georgia. We said this yesterday too, and I'll say it again. For Caleb Downs to commit out of high school to Alabama and to Nick Saban, that to me tells me a lot about his priorities. Like there was definitely other schools you'd have to believe that were throwing bigger NIL bags. You don't really think about Alabama as being on like, the number one school when it comes to NIL. I'm sure they participate in that, top tier range, but I don't know if they're like the top school throwing a bag for you. But for Caleb Downs, it was very clear he wanted to go to Alabama to play for Nick Saban and to be developed by the very best. And so with development being a focal point of what he wants to get out of his next stop, you have to believe, where else are you looking besides Kirby Smart, who's churned out top defenses year in and year out and top draft picks from your defensive side of the football year in and year out. So with priorities that we believe he has, with the relationship with T-Rob, with the ties to the state of Georgia, like Georgia feels like the school to me. Also, I'll say this too, when you talk about putting a timeline on your commitment, Steve Wiltfong from 24/7 Sports reported last night that Caleb Downs wanted to make a decision within 48 hours. If you're taking 48 hours to decide, you probably have a pretty good gauge as to where you're headed. And if you only need 48 hours to decide, it means you're probably pretty familiar with where you want to be. And I don't think there's a school that he's more familiar with than the Georgia Bulldogs. So again, I'd be surprised if it's not Georgia. Speaking to some folks that are closer to Georgia this morning, there's a fair amount of confidence on their side of things that they're going to land Caleb Downs. Think about what that would mean, man. You have Caleb Downs playing next to Malachi Starks. That immediately is the best safety combination in America. Period, mic drop, the end. Like that's the level of talent you add to that back end. Makes them scary. Makes them very, very scary if you're asking me. Also, there was this narrative around Georgia and like, hey, why can't they land top safeties? KJ Bolden's committed to Florida State. Caleb Downs is at Alabama. My. How the turntables, to quote Michael Scott. If Caleb Downs commits, you have both of those top safeties from the state of Georgia. And oh, by the way, you have Malachi Starks as well. So with Tyke Smith and Javon Bullard leaving, Caleb Downs getting on the field regardless, but there's a little bit more of that need there to play alongside like a Malachi Starks. But again, Georgia to me is probably the school that I'm looking most closely at. And I'd be surprised if they don't end up landing Caleb Downs. But we got to talk about Ohio State too, because they're, again, making a strong push, it sounds like, making a strong effort, rather, to try and land Caleb Downs. And I keep saying this because I think it's relevant. Like, the fact that Caleb Downs popped up at Ohio State, Michigan, instead of the Iron Bowl the last week of the regular season in Columbus, Ohio, surprise visit, like, I think that says something about how highly he thinks of Jim Knowles, how highly he thinks of what Ohio State is overall. And you talk about what they are defensively, like, you go play next to Lathan Ransom, another really talented safety in the college football landscape, and go play on a defense that is returning a lot of top guys from last year's top 10 unit, and play on a team that has a real hunger and chip on their shoulder, and under a coach who is feeling, I think, a really strong sense of urgency to win right now. Like, I think that'd be appealing. It'd be fun to be a part of, is what I'm trying to say. If Ohio State were to land Caleb Downs, I think you got to give the greatest hat tip in the world to Ryan Day for the way that he has attacked the portal, man. Because if they land Caleb Downs, that's their third major fish off the top of my head that they would have landed. Will Howard, got your quarterback from Kansas State. Quinshon Judkins, for a lot of people's money, one of the best backs in the country, averaged right around 7 yards a carry in the SEC. And then you land the very top player in the transfer portal, who is all-everything safety as a true freshman at Alabama, Caleb Downs. So if you do that, I think we got to change our tune about Ryan Day. And I say our tune as a college football public, like, we've kind of held the sentiment about Ryan Day. Dude's a good coach. Like, say all you want about what Urban Meyer left him as a roster and as a program at Ohio State, he has taken it on as his own, and he has completely revamped that defense from year to year from what they were before Jim Knowles got there, and he has not rested on his laurels by any stretch of the imagination with how they've recruited at the high school level or the portal, and Caleb Downs feels like that would be an exclamation mark to landing that. So whether it's Georgia, whether it's Ohio State, like I said, Caleb Downs is one of those guys that's going to walk in day one and make your football team better on the field, yes, because he's just a dog, period. Like, super active tackler, had 70 solo tackles as a safety last season, so he's not afraid to mix it up in the box. As he was a true freshman last year, that means something. He wants to tackle. Great ball skills, 2 interceptions, had one in the Rose Bowl that ended up not counting, but you saw, like, he wasn't afraid of the big stage. That's on the field. You know he's going to be a ball player for you. I think what he does for you in a meeting room, in a locker room, in a weight room, in off-season position drills, like, he's going to make the overall temperature of your football team better. And we said this previously. I want to make sure we say it one more time because we've got a lot of y'all tuned in right now. Caleb Downs is a thermostat kind of individual. His intensity, the way people talk about him, the way that people say that he carries himself. Nick Saban talking about him in his post-retirement press conference, or interview rather, means something. Dude's a pro. As a true sophomore, I guess he's currently a true freshman. He'll be a true sophomore next year. That intensity that Caleb Downs carries himself with, and his professionalism, that's contagious. And these are two operations at Ohio State and Georgia that have a fair amount of pros in their locker room already. But you have to believe, you add Caleb Downs to that mix to up the ante even more, like, that's where football games are won. You play the games on Saturdays, that's true, but football games are won by how you do things every day in those winter conditioning drills, in those workouts, in the meeting room where you're breaking down tape from spring practice. And to have somebody that's going to up the level even more in Caleb Downs, massive addition. So we'll keep an eye on this. We'll have immediate reaction as soon as he commits, whether it's Georgia, whether it's Ohio State. We will have a reaction for you. So keep it locked right here so you don't miss it. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.